Okay, in this video, I want to talk about using the multi-cut tool. So the multi-cut tool is a great way of adding new vertices and edges and making new cuts into your model that are more freeform or hand-drawn. So I want to start with the multi-cut tool. And I'll go ahead and say this is a tool that I'm going to use the majority of the time whenever I need to add new vertices and edges. So let's go ahead and go over its basic usage first. So in order to start working with the multi-cut tool, all you really have to do is start clicking on an edge, a vertex, or a face, and it'll just start going. And as I'm going, notice that it is drawing a new vertex every time I click, and then connecting that vertex to the previous one with a new edge. So it's adding vertices and then connecting them with edges. So I'll start here. You'll see as I'm clicking and drawing it, I can really do whatever I want in this case, because it can't cross back over itself. Press and click over here. And so you'll see every time I click on a new spot, um, it is drawing an edge to the previous one. And then whenever you're done, you just press enter, and it is now live topology that you can use. I'll go to vertex mode so you can see. And so each of those spots I clicked on have created verts. So this is really cool because you can see right here, let's say I want to make this really funky looking cut here because I need to attach it, or maybe I'm cutting a hook. It almost kind of looks like a hook for something. Um, you can do that, but the only problem is if you're not using it right or you're not being careful, you will notice that you start to get some really bad topology, right? So you see I have some n-gons and some just pretty generally bad, gnarly stuff going on. So when you're using this tool, it's a good idea to just be careful of where you're adding these edge loops. And when you add them, just like with a lot of modeling tools, is just double check your work after you've added it to make sure it's clean topology and you're not going to run into any issues. Okay, let's slow it down a little bit. So I'm going to step through how to use this. First, I'm going to start on either a vertex or edge. You can start in the middle of the face, really depends on what you're going for, but I generally just start on an edge or a vertex. When you click on an edge or vertex, you can see I have a percentage here. If you click on the edge, it's telling you what percentage of that line or that edge that you're cutting it at. So you can see this is 20%, 25% on this side and 75% on that side. If you hold shift while you're doing this, you can snap to a 10% increment. So this is really handy if you just want to get to, let's say you're cutting through multiple edges and you want to make sure that this length or this percentage is the same. So I want to cut here and I want to make sure it's also 20%. So I'm going to click and drag and hold 10. So this is going to be 80%. That's 100% minus 20, 80%, 80%, 80%. And as long as each of these edges are the exact same size, then that's no big deal, right? And so now I know those are all the equal length. I can start on a vertex as well. So just as you might expect, I can click and stop on a vertex, press enter to complete it. When I am adding a new multi-cut and I want to end it or start it on the actual vertex and not on the edge, sometimes it can be a little tricky because you'll try to, let's see, I'll start clicking here. Say I want to go here, here, I want to end it right there. Sometimes you'll click really close, but you'll actually end up clicking on the edge. And so it'll look like you did it, right? In this case, you can obviously tell I didn't, but it'll look like you did it. But then if you go to smooth preview or go to vertex mode, you'll notice it's not quite there. So of course I can clean this up by using like maybe the target weld tool or merge tool. But generally whenever I'm drawing it out, what I like to do is, do that again. If you click on the edge, you can actually click and drag all the way down to the vertex. And you'll see when it turns yellow, that's when it's actually on the vertex itself and not on an edge. You see how it's blue and has a number? That's when it's on an edge. And I can snap it down to the vertex and then press enter. With the multi-cut tool, I can also click across multiple edges, right? So I can cut across multiple edges. So I can click here and then click over here. And you'll see it automatically cuts across. I think by default, this is camera-based. So depending on the angle you're looking at it at and the curvature of the surface, it's going to cut through it differently. I could go ahead and hold down here, I'll go snap to 20%, and then as long as it's a straight line, and I come over here and snap to 20%, I'll know that that cuts across 20% across all of them. Probably the most frequent usage I have for the multi-cut tool isn't actually just to draw out freestanding cuts like this, it's actually to drop in new edge loops, right? So an edge loop that goes across an entire poly loop or poly strip or also just polygons that are lined up correctly. So in order to do that, all you have to do is, with the multi-cut tool selected, hold Control, and you'll see it's actually going to drop down a edge loop that goes across a poly loop. So I just left click and then drops it in there. I can also hold Shift and it will snap, just like when I'm doing the normal mode, it's going to snap to 10%. And if I hold Control and middle mouse click and let go, it'll actually snap to the middle. So it's going to do it at the 50%. So I'll do this very frequently. If I need to, split this in half, I'll hold Control, middle mouse click, let go, Control, middle mouse click, and let go, and there we go. We have this perfect 50% cut going down the middle. So here I'm going to do a practical demonstration of using the multi-cut. Here I have a cube, really basic object, and then I have a rounded sphere thingy that was cut into it, right? But the topology, because I was using Boolean, isn't very nice, right? It's not connecting. If I smooth this out, you can see that's clearly not going to fly. And that's because we have all these weird n-gons and bad topology going on. So this is a bigger conversation for just topology in general, but I'm just going to connect it so I have nice edge flow and quads again. So I can just click on here, press enter, and I can just connect these to the places where I think it makes sense, right? So I'm just taking this n-gon and connecting vertices to existing vertices and splitting this up into quads. So you can see now these are all quads instead of n-gon. I'll just continue it over here. Something that you can also do is you can kind of quote unquote ride along an existing edge. So you can see I can come down here and instead of pressing enter and having to start a new one over here, what I could do is I can start here, click to attach here, click over here, right? It's going to ride along this. It's not going to create a new edge because there's already an edge here, so you don't have to worry about that. Click on that one, go up to here, click on that one, press enter, and it's doing the same thing as if I click, click, enter, click, click, enter, right? So that just saves me a little bit of time. I'm just going to come up here, finish this off, press enter. It's not going to look great as a model, but you'll see now it's much happier, right? I'm not getting those weird artifacts because these are all now quads. So multi-cut's really great for combining objects together for sure. So here I have another example of where I'm going to need to use the multi-cut to cut up some n-gons. So you can see I was beveling some edges and I ended up splitting these faces over here into n-gons, right, with all these different sides to them. So I'm going to split them up into quads so it's a lot friendlier, right, because that does not look very good. So I'm going to show you another functionality with the multi-cut tool, and that is if you hold Control Shift when you use it, it will actually do an angled snap, right? So you can see I'm getting a cut across there that is 90 degrees when I use that Control Shift. Otherwise, it's either based on whatever this percentage is on this edge are. That looks actually pretty straight, but it's probably not completely flat or orthogonal or perpendicular to that current point, right? So I'm kind of just guessing, or I could freeform it, but sometimes I want this new edge that I'm cutting to be orthogonal or perpendicular to the edge that I'm cutting it into. So if I hold Control Shift, you'll see I get this and it snaps. Press enter. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing right here. Control Shift, snap, press enter. Right? And so you'll see now I've cut that n-gon just into quads, right? 4 sides, 4 sides, 4 sides, 4 sides. So I'm going to keep doing that across my mesh. Do that down here as well. So I'm just going to start here, Control Shift, click, enter, click here, Control Shift. In this case, I can come all the way across, enter. All right, now that's all quads. Control Shift. Oh, let's press enter. Select this one, Control Shift, enter, Control Shift, enter, and Control Shift, enter. All right. So the nice thing about that is it just gives me those really, really nice orthogonal straight lines if I'm really worried about that as I'm cutting into my mesh. I want to show you another useful trick I like to use with the multi-cut tool. So I'm going to open up the tool settings for that by double clicking on the tool or clicking on the tool settings here or up here. And so I'm going to be using edge flow. And so what this does is that when I cut with my multi-cut tool now, let's show it without it first. If I add a cut, I'm going to hold Control, middle mouse click, let go to add a new edge loop, and you'll see it adds the edge loop in. With the edge flow, if I now use this, it'll actually adjust the shape to match the curvature of the bounding edges you're cutting into. Okay, it's not perfect, but sometimes in certain situations, this can be really helpful for adding in new edges because often whenever you add new edges in with the multi-cut tool or insert edge loop tool, it can start to flatten your model out because you're adding more divisions, but the surface you're adding into stays flat. Here's another example I have right here. If I just added, let's go ahead and turn off edge flow. If I just added this edge in, you'll see that shape hasn't actually adjusted, right? Click in, let go. But now when I turn on edge flow and add that in, you'll see it actually matches that curvature a little bit better. I am currently using a value of 0.85. This is really dependent on what you're doing, and certain situations, certain curvatures work better, or certain edge weights work better, one or a lower value. In my case, I often leave this at just 0.85 because I tend to like that value and it tends to give me good results. I will say this doesn't always work perfectly, right? It really is situation dependent, right? So I can add these in here. This is working great. I can click on here, but now it's starting to change that shape. So you got to be careful of when you have it on and when you have it off, because you don't always want it to actually be changing the shape, right? Because this part I want to be straight going this way. So I want to turn it off. But it's really handy, especially if you want to add new edge loops and try to keep your mesh feeling smooth and clean. Here I have an example that I want to show another functionality of the multi-cut tool. And so what you can do with the multi-cut tool is we've been clicking in the mesh, but you can actually click and drag off the mesh. And that's going to be using something called the slice functionality, right? And you'll see, let's turn off smooth mode, that it actually cuts through your mesh in a really quick way. We can do this with the normal multi-cut functionality, but this just speeds up the workflow a lot faster. So in this case, if I wanted to cut off these bricks, so I made this tiling brick pattern, and I went to cut off the bricks to the left of this molding right here, because I don't need that part, this slice tool is going to make it really easy for me to cut through there. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to the front view. We're just going to grab this object. Okay, zoom in on it, use the multi-cut tool. I'm also going to turn on the X-ray mode so I can see through it. And so I'm going to cut right here so I can detach and delete this stuff over here. So I'm going to start clicking off the mesh, and I'm going to hold shift so I can actually get a an angle going to it, or a straight line going. And you'll see when I let go, now I've deleted or added a new cut all the way through that mesh. So I'm going to come in here, oops, come in here, and I'll just grab all these faces here, delete, and let's turn off that X-ray mode. And now you can see that we've cut that off really nicely. And so as always with the multi-cut tool, you know, I want to double check in certain situations if my mesh is okay, if I left behind any bad topology, but in this case, it's going to be probably all points. So I want to end this video with a practical demonstration of how to use this. So here I have two pipes, and I've actually already combined them together. And I could use booleans, but in this case, I want to go ahead and just use traditional combining objects together. So I combine them together, and I need to prepare a hole so I could weld them together. And so what I'm going to do is on this original mesh, I'm just isolating it so you can see it here. I want to cut a hole that's going to be where this object attaches to it. So I'm going to select my multi-cut tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and start by adding a edge loop that goes across here. So I'm going to hold Control, left click. Oops, let me go ahead and make sure I have my edge flow turned off. Okay, Control. And from here, I'm just going to cut around to where I know that I'm going to have that hole. So come around here, to right around there, press center, and start it on the other side as well. All right, and I'm just matching up where these guys are going to actually connect. Okay, I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to isolate it. And you just click this button to isolate. I'm using Control 1. I'm going to use the tab key so I can paint my selection. So I'm just going to select these faces here. Press delete. All right. And so let's go ahead and bring those back. Let me go ahead and also add in an edge loop here. And I'm going to delete these faces here. So I'm making kind of a bridge across. Or I'm making an area, two holes where I can bridge across easily. So I'm going to select this guy, and use the bridge tool. Right? So now you can see I've cut that hole in so I can easily bridge these objects together. And so then I would just go in and use my multi-cut tool. And let's go ahead, and for this one, I'm going to add edge flow. So let's see if that helps with that curvature a little bit. Turn that edge flow back off. And I'm going to go ahead and add an edge loop here, an edge loop here, edge loop towards the top, and edge loop down here, edge loop down here, and edge loop down there. And I'm just going to drop one in the middle here, and I'm just going to select these guys and scaling them down. Okay, now I'll just smooth that out. And now I have a pretty good weld between these two pipes. Right? So especially when you're combining objects together, like I like to model things separately, and that can be for another video later. But I like to model things separately and combine them together. It makes figuring out their topology a lot easier. And so that multi-cut tool is instrumental for bringing those objects actually together. And so that's the basics of the multi-cut tool. It's super important and useful for adding new edges and cuts and holes where you need them to be.